Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that just a little while ago sent the wrong message to the wrong person. And how wrong was it? I'm one of your hosts, John Bruford, joined by your other host, Fintan Costello. Fintan, hello.
Hello, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So, who got the wrong message? You.
Fern.
Can I ask?
My ex and mother of my children.
Oh dear. Oh no. Oh no.
No, it could have been much worse.
It's nothing she hasn't seen before, but
no, we don't do that. I'm a grown up.
I've got my imagination, Fintan. I don't need pictures.
Although that does remind me, this is a story from many years ago, but this is a bizarre one, right? Now, when Lorna was about 14 or 15, she had a boyfriend, and he sent her a picture, and she's like, "Why has he sent me a picture of this?" I'm like, "Uh-oh. Why has he sent you a picture of what?" He sent me a picture of his foot. Why has he sent me a picture of his foot? And I'm like, I don't know.
That's not a toe, love.
She shows the picture to her mum, and her mum's like, Jesus, what the fuck's going on with his toe? What kind of foot's that? What the hell? And it was a picture of a guy's knob in a lady's shoe, in like a strappy shoe. But, you know, it sort of looks like a deformed foot, I suppose. But I'm like, I can't believe I have to tell you both this, but that's a knob.
Wow. But
no, it's not. Let's have another look. I'm like, it definitely is. And then her mum's like, Lorna was, let's have another look. No.
Delete. Well, one of the best, I was reading something online, and it was this woman told me she got like an unsolicited dick pic. And then her response was kind of where they shared the screenshots of the conversation. She's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you sent me a picture of a child's penis. I'm reporting this to the FBI as child porn."
That's very good.
Brilliant.
Ticks so many boxes. Nobody's coming back from that.
Yeah.
The perfect burn. No, so I was communicating this morning on WhatsApp with a chap I know well from the casino industry. He works at one of the London casinos, and we're supposed to be catching up on a call. And we've been supposed to be catching up on a call for like a week. And I said this morning, look, I just need to, go and have a shower and shave my head and all that sort of jazz, and give me about an hour. So an hour passes, and I say, right, I'm free. You ready? And he goes, well, I've just got to let somebody into my flat. Just give me 20 minutes. And I left it like 35 minutes. And I'm like, well, it's been over 20 minutes now. I'm like, I did no answer to that at all. So I messaged, fine, I'll just have that wank I've been putting off. Except, in between, I had messaged Fern to say, I won't take the kids to that den building thing on Friday. I'll take them back to mine. Which I then followed with, fine, I'll just have that wank I've been putting off.
Oh, God.
Fern comes back with,
wrong chat.
Was that meant for me? No, it wasn't. And then of course, I messaged my significant other to say, I can't believe I've just sent the wrong message to completely the wrong person. And she came back with, so how exactly do you speak to your colleagues then? I'm just curious. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, this could look bad. This could look bad, all ends up. Do you speak to your colleagues like that? Yes, I do. I definitely do. Not all of them, just the special ones.
It happens.
What a start to the day. But good times,
Good adrenaline dump just to get the system fired up.
But it did kind of reveal to me.
Will this be evidence in custody battles in the future, kind of thing? Oh my God.
It did reveal to me where my threshold for embarrassment is, because I was not even slightly embarrassed. I was just annoyed at myself.
Yeah, you have to be.
What you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Got it wrong. Not the first. Probably won't be the last. But anyway. So, Fintan, this episode that we're introducing now, well, two things about this episode. One, we've got Hollywood-style production values on this one. And two...
no pressure, lads. I want a six-pack. I want to get rid of these lines. John wants hair.
Exactly. I want a ginger afro, basically. And I'll be happy with that. And then next week we'll discuss that. Maybe a Kid and Play style haircut.
I loved Kid and Play as a kid.
Well, yesterday I was looking on LinkedIn, and there was a picture of Alex Dixon. Do you remember Alex? He came on the podcast.
Friend of the podcast.
There's a picture of him with a musician who I was not aware of. I mean, I hope the musician knew to ask Alex for his autograph. But there was kind of there was like the night sky, sort of like a dusky sky in the background, but there was a silhouette of a tree, and it was over Alex's head. And at first glance, I'm like, "Fuck, has he gone all Kid and Play?" You know, like in House Party with the immortal line by the policeman in House Party, "Hey, Eraserhead," which, you know, let's face it, it's not really a Kid and Play audience kind of joke. It's a David Lynch fan joke. So there's me laughing my ass off and nobody else is laughing. But anyway, I digress. Again, it's so easily done. But this, no, let's just mention first our sponsors. But I don't think we need to mention IGB Live on this one, because I think we'll be out just after IGB Live.
It's either just after, we're either recovering, I'm either mid IGB Live. So right now when you're listening to this, I've either got a beer in my hands at IGB Live. I mean, busy networking stuff, business meetings at IGB Live. Or it's the post-conference anxiety as I kind of like detox and recover and sleep and all that kind of stuff.
Anxiety.
Yeah. Oh, it's when you get, do you not get it? So you don't drink anymore, but I've noticed as I get older, the post-boozing effect on my system and just anxiety just gets dialed up a bit. Never happened in my 20s. Happens in my 40s. And then a friend introduced me.
Never happened to me.
A friend introduced me to the term of anxiety.
Even that awards show where I nick my boss's phone, nothing.
Just shameless.
I'm a little bit like the Terminator in many ways.
You know what? I was thinking the exact same. You're just like emotionless, logical, rational, mission focused.
It's very fair.
Undeterred, handy on a motorbike.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you've just touched on maybe the best line in any Terminator film, which, let's face it, there's not actually a lot of competition once you get past the first two. It's Robert What's-His-Chops as the T-1000, and he just walks up to the copper and he goes, "Say, that's a nice bike." It's fantastic. I love that line. But anyway, maybe it's just me.
Maybe it's just you.
Yeah. The other great line for Terminator 2 for my money was, Mom, there's cops outside. How many? All of them, I think. But controversial opinion, I think the first one's better than the second one.
It's probably a better story in the first one, but I think the second one with the special effects, like that first moment,
big leap.
when you see he goes through the metal bars thing, that was a real holy shit moment in cinema for special effects, because it looked so realistic.
Do you remember, like in the hospital with the security guards? He imitates one of the guards and then kills him. It's like they still were creative, and it wasn't all just special effects, because they did actually just employ twins for that scene.
Nice.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, so there was some smart stuff there where there was that moment where it was and then it was a classic kind of, Arnold being the hero rather than the bad guy kind of thing as well. So that was the other bit.
Yeah. Do you know that I think maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe I think there's only one actor that's been killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator. Maybe two, but I think it's just one. Yeah, I'm going to say it's just one. Bill Paxton, the late, great Bill Paxton. In Predator 2, he's one of the young toughs at the start of Terminator. Hey, man, nice night for a walk. And he is... Hang on a second, Terminator. Yeah, Predator 2 is one of the police. And in Aliens, he's the brilliant Hudson, I think was the character name. It's game over, man.
Oh, was that him?
Yeah. Phenomenal. Wonderful actor. Terrific director as well. Sadly, died all too young. But the other one that you could possibly claim is Lance Henriksen, who was Bishop in Aliens, but he's still alive at the end of the film because he's the android gets torn in half. He's one of the police in the police station in the Terminator. And he's in, I think it's Alien versus Predator, one of those movies for sure, because he's the guy that the android is based on, so he's the dude that owns the company. Sorry, went a long way around there. I don't know why I just shared that. But I was actually, we were talking about our sponsors.
We were talking about our sponsors, John. So we were just talking about IGB Live.
I'm like a Terminator. I'm so focused.
We're either yeah. Everybody's thinking the same. So we're either mid IGB Live or post recovery IGB Live.
But nevertheless, one of our key sponsors is Clarion Gaming.
Yeah.
Who put on that delete as applicable, fabulous celebration of iGaming, debacle, massacre, whatever it is.
Whatever you want to call it. So there's that going on. We've also got the wonderful Optimove.
Wonderful.
iGaming industry's #1 CRM platform.
CRM platform of choice, I think we can call it.
Yeah, over 50% of the EGR Power 50 use it, and growing.
And it's probably the most powerful 50% that are using it, but that is speculation on my part.
It's definitely the top 50%.
I think so.
And they're great, and they do some good. Their newsletter's actually really good as well. I was reading it the other day. They do some really good insights and stuff, and it's great because they sit on so much data, so it's brilliant.
It's interesting because you unsubscribed to mine, didn't you?
I got resubscribed. You might want to check your...
Not by me.
I definitely got your daily email today. We won't get into that.
I didn't WhatsApp you, did I?
Fintan's getting paid. GDPR, bitches.
Well, look, I definitely didn't resubscribe you.
It's okay. I might have had it on multiple email addresses.
Who's on the episode?
On the episode, we have Christina Cook from
founder
of the BrokeGirlSociety.com.
Yeah, and I'm actually Christina's somebody that I've wanted to have on for a little while.
Yeah,
we had it booked for quite a while, and it's one of those guests where I just wish we'd had a bit more time. But no, she speaks very frankly about her own journey, but also about kind of what we're doing wrong in terms of people who are developing problems.
Yeah. So she's 3. I think she's just over 3 years gambling free. She talks about kind of her path into problem gambling, and then what she's been doing since, and how she's been helping other people. And
the podcast part in that as well.
Yeah, she's got the podcast, she's got the website, she does a lot of great stuff, and I think we touch on it. And Christina makes the point really well of there's lots of men talking about it, and there's like if you look at kind of media, the stereotype of problem gamblers is men. And when you look at the landscape of people talking about problem gambling, it's typically men. Opinionated middle-aged white guys on the podcast.
Coincidence.
Just because our voices need to be heard. And no, but seriously though, it's showing that it's not just you. It affects other people, and there's somebody to talk to and things like that. So it's really, really thoughtful. She was very open, really passionate about what she does, and I think it was just a lovely conversation. It was really, really nice.
Definitely.
Yeah,
big fans. So meet Christina of the Broke Girls Society. It's with great pleasure and excitement that I introduce our guest in this episode. We're big fans. We have Christina Cook, who is the founder, host, matriarch of the Broke Girls Society podcast. Christina, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
As we always say at this point, Christina, you'd probably be better to thank us at the end and make sure you actually want to, because it could go really wrong. So where do we begin? So you personally are a gambling addict in recovery, right?
Correct.
And so would you be happy to share your story with us of how you got to this point, how you got to now?
Absolutely. I am from Oklahoma, which is just smack dab in the middle of the States. And we have, I'm just lay out the gambling landscape a little bit for where I'm at. So here in Oklahoma, we have brick and mortar casino gambling. We don't have online gambling. We don't have sports betting yet. All that will be coming eventually. But we honestly didn't have gambling until the early 2000s, I think, is when the first casino was built. And now we have 146 casinos in Oklahoma. So for me, gambling wasn't something I grew up with. It wasn't really anything that I really knew about or understood. My mom went to bingo occasionally. And that's really my experience with gambling before I started gambling. I had even gone to Vegas a couple of times on trips. And, I think 2 times before I even really started gambling, I went and I didn't even gamble. So I didn't really have a relationship with gambling until they built a casino just up the road from my home. And I started going there occasionally on girls' nights, birthdays, to celebrate whatever was going on. And so it just was something I did occasionally. And then I found myself in my late 20s divorcing. And I didn't have kids. All my friends were still married or getting married and having babies. And I felt so disconnected from that because I was going through a divorce. Again, didn't have kids. And so I was looking for something to do on a Friday night. I wasn't somebody that was for the bars or anything like that. And so the casino felt safe to me. And saying that now, it just, gets me. But that's where I would find myself on Friday night or Saturday night, just going up there, gambling a little and having a drink. And it became kind of my social circle up there. And it was pretty, it became something I did maybe every other week, a couple times a month. It wasn't anything that really latched on quickly. It wasn't until a few years later when it really just started to kind of pick up. It just started becoming this coping mechanism for me. I would go up there if I was having a hard day. I would go up there if I was having a good day. I would go up there. I didn't really need a good excuse to go up there, but any excuse got me into the casino. And so for, the first few years, it was responsible, responsible gambling, safe gambling. I didn't spend my bill money. I just spent my extra money. And then as life continued to progress for me, I found myself in a type of relationship that I'd never experienced. I'd found myself in a very mentally and verbally abusive relationship. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to get myself out of it. I didn't know how to deal with it because it wasn't like this physical violence, right? It wasn't like this, oh, he's hitting me. So I just couldn't justify the abuse that I was experiencing. And I wasn't understanding the abuse that I was experiencing. It was just a lot of breaking me down mentally. And so I turned to gambling as a way to kind of cope with these emotions that I didn't know how to explain to anybody. I didn't know how to justify that, it was some type of abuse. Maybe I didn't understand it. I think a lot of the times that what I was experiencing was abuse because, again, it wasn't this physical act of abuse. It was just this mental breakdown, like breaking me down in everything I did. And I didn't know how to navigate it. I didn't have the tools to navigate it, I think, because I'd never experienced anything like that. And so I just found myself gambling more and more to escape like the emotions, the feelings of like, I can't fix this. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do. And unfortunately that relationship lasted a really long time. And as I really was starting to break down, like gambling just really came in for me. And so I gambled for about 15 years total before I entered recovery. And the last half of that being extremely detrimental and, just physically, financially devastating. I finally, about 15 years in, I was 42 years old and I was just broken in every sense of the word. I was broke physically, emotionally, obviously financially, spiritually, in every sense of the word. And it just felt like just an onslaught of constantly dark thoughts of like, I'd just be better off if I wasn't here. And, that those dark thoughts and stuff kind of set in. And so for me, it was very much like just tearing me down in every sense of the word. Until I had a night with some thoughts that really, really scared me. And I decided I'm going to have to fight for myself. And
wow.
the gist of it there.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting chain, and the way that you told that suggests that you know what the chain is. But you've got the early relationship with the operator, with a location, with positive associations, with celebrations, with friends, with nice sociable things, and then and I was certainly surprised when I was told this. We had that fantastic lady from Gordon Moody's on, and she explained that domestic abuse is one of the primary drivers for women developing gambling issues, which makes perfect sense. But you don't necessarily join those dots, and of course, when you're disenfranchised, when you're looking for some element of control in your life, it makes perfect sense to go to a place that you have positive associations with, where you've had good experiences, where people know you and say hello and etc. But still shit though.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is one of the, understanding how you got there is always going to be the journey, right? Like how did something that was supposed to be fun and entertaining become so harmful? But that's where you kind of backtrack and you connect the dots. of like, for me, the addiction was a symptom of the internal issues, right? So it makes absolute sense that pairs.
Well, that's one of the things that's very often ignored. Sorry, Fintan. It is that gambling addiction is, in almost every instance I've ever heard of, it's and I always use this phrase because it kind of fits but kind of doesn't, but it's a comorbidity. It's a symptom of another ill. And it's one of those things that, when the criticism's leveled at the industry, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of times when the criticism is well deserved. But without a multi-agency approach, the gambling industry can't solve domestic abuse or alcohol abuse or substance abuse. It's got to be part of, because you can throw all the money that you want at gambling issues, but until, as a friend of mine says, you can throw all the money in the world at social ills, but until you solve poverty, you're absolutely pissing in the wind. And yeah, I feel the same about gambling addiction, and I'm certainly not trivializing anybody's experience with it, but you have to deal with the other thing as well. So, I mean, when you had your sort of your epiphany, what happened when you had that? When you hit the bottom and you thought, well, fuck this, I've either got to fight or I'm going to make an early exit. What was the process from there? Where did you go? And how does your podcast fit into that journey as well?
Yeah. So it was a really bad night, just kind of leading up to that moment. Excuse me. I had tried to stop gambling, and I had made it about like just on my own, white knuckling it. I didn't know anything about recovery or any of that. Because again, I just thought I was the only one that just couldn't do it normally. I thought I was the only one that was struggling with this. And I'm sure you hear this a lot with people who have experienced harm from gambling, is they think they're the only one, right? And especially for women, like, of course, I've heard stories of the man gambler. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty prominent. And that's what a lot of people think when you think of like the degenerate gambler or whatever, because it's just, you kind of go to the stereotypes the movies use. And so I hadn't really experienced like a female version gambler, right? So I just thought I was the only one. And I was watching a show late at night one night. It was about food addiction, and I just connected with what they were saying. And I thought, okay, I'd made a lot of changes in my life thinking that was the problem, right? I'd got out of that relationship. Finally, I had kind of transitioned in different ways. I'd entered a new relationship that had its own issues, and all these things. I'd lost weight. I'd gotten my health back on track. Like some of these things that I kept thinking was the problem. I was never thinking gambling was the problem. I was always thinking it was me and something else was the problem. And there's truth to that. But I just kept trying to do all these other things. And finally it was late, right? I'd made it 60 days, relapsed. And I relapsed hard. It was like a manic thing. It was like a week-long gambling every day. I had some of the biggest wins of my life in that week, and I had lost every penny of it to the mania, to the gambling. And I was just so like, I was ready to drive off a bridge. Like it was so like I had caused so much harm, and it's so hard for me to share 15 years of gambling experiences, right? 15 years of the awful stories, the stress, everything that I went through, everything I put my family through in my gambling. It's so hard to do this in like a 45-minute hour podcast. And so my story always kind of sounds the same because it's hard to kind of really dig in there and share those details. But the night that it was after a week-long binge, and the thoughts were the scariest I've ever felt, and like wanting to end my life. And I knew that I couldn't do it. A picture of my mom and my sisters had popped up on my phone from my sister's wedding. And it was just like, I loved them so much. And I knew that they loved me. They were just tired of what I was putting them through. And so I went to my mom the next morning, and I just told her. I told her what'd been going on with me, which they knew, like not necessarily the gambling, but they knew something was wrong, and they were actually trying to figure out how to stage an intervention for me. But they were so scared that I would get mad and never talk to them again. And that scared them more than the harm that I was causing myself. And it was, so once I talked to my mom, she had known somebody who'd gone to GA, and she's like, I think that's where you need to start. And so we kind of made a plan. I called the GA hotline. And I didn't have the best experience with the hotline, but I just knew that if I didn't keep pushing forward, that I was not going to be okay. And so I made myself go to that first GA meeting, and it was a wonderful experience to be in a room full of people who understood. Like, I felt seen and heard for the first time in years. But it was also a room full of older men, and I was the only female there. And though I was grateful to them, they were kind. And I stayed with that meeting for a year of my recovery. It was still like, I knew when I left that meeting that I needed so much more than just reciting a yellow book and with, a 35-minute meeting. And so I kind of wanted to see a woman talking about this. I wanted to connect in that way. I wanted to connect on, like, not just like going to a room, sharing my struggle with gambling, reading out of a yellow book and leaving. Like, I needed more than that. And this is not to go against GA. It's an amazing program that has saved thousands and thousands of lives. But I just knew for myself that if I wanted to save my life, I had to do more than that. And I wanted to talk with women who were just struggling in the same way of family life, work life, balance life, and recovery. And so I wasn't finding that. Another piece of that is I started talking with an addiction specialist as therapy, as a piece of that. But aside from that, I started searching social media to see if I could find anybody. I came across Stacey Goodwin's channel. She's an amazing person over there in the UK who's talking about gambling harm. But I wanted to see more of it. And I thought, well, if I can't find it, I guess I'll be it. I didn't want to be the face of problem gambling for women in the US, but I also didn't want anybody else to feel like I was feeling. So I started like early vlogging my journey, like my 30-day coin that I got from the GA, or my 60 days, or when I made it through like 3 months of paychecks without gambling. So I started kind of doing those things on social media. And then I had a podcaster friend reach out to me, and she wanted me to come on her podcast. And podcasts were something I was listening to, but it was very male dominated. You have the All In Addicted Gamblers podcast. You have After Gambling podcast. Like, a lot of the ones in the UK are male dominated. And it was like, I wasn't really hearing women in the same capacity. And so when she reached out to me, and she has a podcast that was just general, like beyond the 12 steps, like after addiction, but her story included gambling as well. And so after I did her podcast, I was like, I could do this. It's not hard, right? Like, I could do this. And so yeah, that started my journey. I just added that as part of my recovery. And I kept thinking, well, what am I going to name this podcast? And the word broke showed up in a lot of my journaling, just the same way I said it. It broke financially, obviously, that's the play, but broke financially, spiritually, mentally, physically, all these different ways. And so the Broke Girl Society came about, and I started doing this podcast. And from the minute I started doing it, I had women reaching out to me from all over the world saying, thank you so much for sharing your story. And at first it was really, really hard, but we can get into that.
Well, that is somewhere we want to go. But Fintan, I butted in early. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you'd actually asked the question I was going to ask then. And a different question. So you talked about, like, there was the week of mania, and it's all land-based gambling and stuff. And some of the things, say, for example, in the UK that we hear from the industry is that land-based casinos are safer than online casinos because there's like physical staff. It's easier to intervene. You can read body language. Game speed is slower and things like this. But it sounds like, so I suppose, what was your experience in a casino through one of these episodes? And was there anything where like somebody was trying to like take you aside and say, hey, we think you need to stop, or this is too much, or what's going on? Or so what was, or was there any intervention or efforts to try and help? Because I'm guessing it would have been fairly obvious to an onlooker, possibly, but maybe not. I don't know. But I'm just curious what that experience was like, and was there any support or intervention or anything like that, or was it just a box ticking exercise?
You know, that's really interesting because, like I said, I gambled for about 15 years, and I live in a relatively decent sized city, or at the time I lived in a relatively decent sized city. And within about a 30-mile radius of me, there was probably 8 different, like, I'm talking Vegas style casinos. These are huge casinos. They're not like little pubs or anything like that. These are huge casinos. And it's interesting because I got to know like all the people there. Like there was one in particular I went to all the time. And then there were a couple others that I went to occasionally. And I still knew like all the waitresses and, you know, the servers and people coming in. It's like the minute I would walk in, they would like go and get me a Dr. Pepper, right? Or which is my favorite drink. And it's like, it's their job to make you feel comfortable, to make you, you know, stay engaged. So I felt like a big part of my social circle was at the casino. So I knew like the people that paid out. I knew the people that served, like people in the cages, like all these different things. You just get to know these people. And you know that they have to be like, okay, she's been here 5 days of 7 days this week. Like, you know that they see it. But a lot of them struggled with gambling themselves. You know, you can't gamble at the casino or the tribal casino that you work at, but you can gamble at different tribal casinos. So it was like a lot of them gambled as well. But, you know, they get to know you. They know when there's a problem. They see it. But nobody ever said to me, maybe you should go home, or until that week that I had that week of mania and I had won this huge, huge jackpot. And it was like, we're talking a really nice car kind of jackpot. And I remember the guy came to me and he was like, no, you're going to go home with this, right? Like, you're going to go home. And this probably happened shortly after I got there. And I was like, oh, absolutely. There is no way I would gamble this amount of money in one, like, and I just remember reassuring him, like, yeah, absolutely. 8 hours later, he walked by me. And this is when I had gambled at that point, most of it back in. And I was just in that manic cycle of chasing losses. And so that was the one time he said anything to me, and he just kind of shook his head when he saw me later. Like he was leaving for the day. You know what I mean? And it was just like, I felt, I still kind of remember that feeling of like, oh, so like I was disappointed in myself. I was disappointed that he was disappointed, like all these different things. But out of the 15 years that I gambled, that was the only time somebody even tried to say something to me. But I'm not sure even if somebody would have said something to me, if I would have listened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. But I suppose it's one of those things that, you know, they should try, right? So like, obviously somebody in that state of mind isn't going to listen, and it's a different thing going on, but you can't just like throw your arm, oh, what can we do? And then just ignore it either, right?
But you think they'd do it just in the sense of ass covering, you know, at the very least.
Well, they'll pick it up from the VIP program or whatever, the loyalty card and stuff. So the data's available. So it's not like it's all a mystery these days. Or, oh, we didn't know what was going on.
Right.
So,
or at least try and
like,
reach out and be like, this is kind of your win-loss statement. Like, this is what you're looking at. Like, maybe you should do a cool-off period, or just give options to the people. At least tell me I had some options, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if it had come to me in that kind of way of like, look, this is kind of what it looks like for you. Are you doing okay? And I guess whether or not the person engages in it or not, it really needs to be more like, and that's where that responsibility, right? That responsible gambling stuff comes in when they're like, well, the responsibility is on the player. It's like, no, like, yes and no. There should be responsibility and accountability on both sides. And yeah, there's so much more that can be done.
I think well, one of the friends of the podcast, as we call him, is Dr. Michael Auer, whose research I'm sure you're probably aware of. Oh fuck, I've forgotten where I was going with this. Oh no, cognitive dissonance. That's it. I was thinking that, like, in a land-based casino, you generally have food options and drinks options and things like that around you. And you can use, or you could use, I'm not actually aware of anybody doing this, but when a player is potentially flagged for problematic patterns, you could comp the player something just to get them away from the game, to give them time to stop and think, so that they can actually get to that state themselves. So in online gaming, they do that with, automated messages that come up in front of the play and say, hey, do you know you've lost this amount? How about you take a break? Do you know you're probably drunk? It's 2 a.m. or whatever. But you could do that in a land-based place because, there is a bar, there is a restaurant, there is a concert, or, especially if somebody's a reasonable sized player, then our research has proven that if you can prevent people from reaching the problematic patterns of play, that you can have a longer and actually more profitable relationship with the player, and they never hit what you would describe as addiction, which I think is really fascinating. What you mentioned Jamie's podcast, actually Jamie Salzberg's podcast, and we're big fans of Jamie here. And I think Jamie and you have some similar views on RG and its efficacy, and you just touched on some there, and it's really interesting. I love Jamie's approach to it because he's coming at it with an eye on marketing and branding and saying, look, it's a marketing and branding thing. It doesn't work because marketing, and Vince, stop me if I'm wrong here, saying the right thing to the right people in the right language at the right time. And using the blanket approach is bollocks. That's an English word, which means it's not very good. It's interesting. Yeah. So within the industry, RG is part of regulation, and regulation defines the bare minimum that an operator needs to do to keep a license. Fundamentally, it defines the boundaries for the license holder, and so people fulfill those responsibilities usually.
But it's the floor, not the. It's used as the ceiling, not the floor, kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. But there's also, and whenever the industry's attacked, and it becomes a very binary conversation. It's like, you fucking evil bastards. You're all bastards and evil ones, etc. And it's kind of, I've seen this so many times, and I'm not being critical of people that are struggling, because I've been addicted to almost fucking everything. But it's about finding the overlap between the player responsibility and the operator responsibility. But as part of recovery, and actually you've done an episode on this, accountability is a key part of recovery, right? So it's finding that overlap. But I've seen so many people who've lost a shit ton of money, and there's never that moment where they go, of course, I could have perhaps behaved differently. And it is a mutual responsibility. And I think one of the issues for me with RG is that those tools are there, and then just because they're there, that means all the responsibility is on the player to use them. As opposed to, let's just use them in the background anyway. Let's make them part of sign up. Let's make them compulsory. If they're for all players, make them part of sign up. And people will piss and moan about it, but actually not for very long because it's really not a big deal. But anyway, sorry, I went off on one a bit there. Any thoughts, anybody?
Well, on the responsible gambling stuff here in the U.S. and other countries they've been dealing with gambling a lot longer. Like the U.S., it feels like, oh well, they've been really gambling in the U.S. is relatively new compared to other countries, right? And how long, like as far as legalized gambling, let me just rephrase that: legalized gambling is. When you compare to the UK or Australia or some of these other countries. And I think what we didn't do is we didn't think about player protections early on. And so that just became kind of the norm, right? So my whole view on it is and we can look at the tobacco industry, right? And it's very similar here on the operators on the US front. When you go and you look at the tobaccos where they were pulled in front of the Senate or whatever, the big CEOs of the tobacco company, and they were asked, do you feel nicotine is addictive? And down the line, they were like, no, I do not feel nicotine is addictive. No, I do not feel nicotine is addictive, down the line. But then it came that there were emails where it basically showed nicotine is addictive. They all at one point acknowledged that nicotine was addictive on these emails. And it's very, like, when you look at the industry itself, the tobacco industry created an addictive, harmful product, right? And then they were opened up, pulled in front of these hearings and made accountable for it, right? Millions and millions and trillions of dollars are put back into all these different things to try and help people either stop smoking, all these ads against smoking, all that kind of thing. Why isn't it similar for the gambling industry, right? They're creating a harmful product, and smoking is just one of those things where you get to choose to do it or not, right? It's not like, here's cigarettes, have one a day and you'll be fine. It's not how it works. And it's same with like gambling. And I don't know if I'm bridging this well enough, but it's one of those things where they've created this harmful product. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't intentional to create harm. I don't think most people go through life creating things that could potentially, create harm of the goal. But why isn't the industry, the gambling industry, the operators, why aren't they looked at in the same way? Harm is being done regardless of how it's being done. They create these products and make it knowing that there's going to be harm done. But there is no federal oversight on how they pay for this harm, right? If they're creating something that's causing harm, and this is in the US, and I know it's very different in a lot of countries, but here in the US, there's no federal funding for gambling recovery. And everything is pushed to a state level. And there are states that have tremendous gambling and very little resources. And there are states that have very little gambling and tremendous resources, but they don't cross. And so it becomes this very frustrating thing. But the way I look at it is the industry literally has like secret sites where they're building these machines to be more engaging, right? And I'm not going to say to be more addictive. They're building them to be more engaging, right? To be more open to the consumers, to pull in more people, to engage them in different ways. Like they'll take your TV show and turn that into a machine to gamble. Right? They take like the visuals of a TV show you love, like Friends or Sex and the City, and then they turn that into a machine that you can play. And you're like, oh, I love that show. I'm going to play the game. You know what I mean? And so they've got all these scientists and all these things, like building all these things. And it's just opening up the possibility of harm, right? And engaging that. They have numbers that say that, but yet you have people who represent the industry in the US and they're like, well, gambling's no more addictive than people are on their cell phones. Like, how can it be comparative? I don't know if you saw that when the head of our gaming industry said that. And it was just like mind blowing. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you just, in that statement, all this harm that everybody has experienced, that the loss of life from gambling, from the gambling harms, all these things. And you just were like, nope. No,
that Bill Miller appearance, was it 60 Minutes, something like that?
Yep.
And I did see it, and I wrote an article about it. Actually, it was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen anybody from the industry do. It was just absolute fucking nonsense.
Heartbreaking for all of us. And, it's like very much a David and Goliath situation here, right? Very much.
But imagine being in the industry and seeing that as well, and thinking, "Oh dear, sweet fuck."
It was definitely frustrating. I think so. I get the, you know, like if you take tobacco, there's tobacco warnings, there's age restrictions, and the scientific evidence is, you know, if you smoke on a regular basis, you will develop some sort of cancer, or, you know, it will cause
heart disease. Usually gets you first, just for the record.
Noted. And then I think I'm not going to even say the nuance, but I think the counter arguments with gambling is there's a segment of the audience that has issues with gambling and it causes them harm, and then there's another audience where it doesn't, for whatever reason, or not for a long period. So I think there's, like, should there be risk warnings? Yes. Should there be age restrictions? Yes. Should there be lots of funding, both from the government and the industry and everything, for helping people? Yes. But it's not cigarettes. It's not, there's no guarantee that if you could gamble all your life and never develop a problem.
But I think the key,
but the challenge is, though, I could walk into a casino and lose everything in one night. Yep. Is the flip side. So there's no, like, I could smoke for 50 years and be completely fine and then stop. But I could literally lose. I can't smoke myself to death in a weekend or an evening, or I can't drink myself to death in an evening.
But you definitely can.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, you black out before you die, kind of thing, or get sick. But with gambling, I could lose everything in a moment of madness. And so there is other. So I suppose it becomes this kind of. There's all these kind of counter arguments, but realistically, yes, it needs more safety rails.
But the federal aspect of what Christina's saying is the really important part of it, because what the US has is 50 separate countries, and you've got probably 3 states that will never have gambling, right? I think it's probably a fair guess. Alaska, Hawaii, Utah, right? But apart from those, I mean, Hawaii's maybe, but the other 2 definitely not. Now, because that's the thing, like the way that cigarettes are treated, it's federal. I mean, there are different provisions, I think, for tobacco and tribal lands, but I can't remember for the life of me what they are. But fundamentally, it's a national plan, and you have to do X amount, which the gambling industry is lacking, and that should be there should be a federal floor for it, but also a federal plan for funding. And it just imagine how much easier this would be as the industry as well, if there was a federal floor or a federal window of taxation that you could choose from, and then you wouldn't have people pulling the tax figures out of their ass, and that would mean different kinds of promotions, etc. Yeah, I don't think federal oversight in the industry would necessarily be a bad thing, and I don't think it would be something to be afraid of. I'm not sure Bill Miller should be involved in it, but that's just me.
Their answer to
it, and gives to charity.
Yeah, their answer to it was, I kind of doubt that, but was to create a responsible gaming council to kind of advise on like the direction of responsible. And they threw millions of dollars at this council, right? That was their response to like, oh, we're taking this serious. And it's like, here in the States, we're trying to pass the GRIT Act, which is the Gambling Recovery Investment Treatment Act. And what it does is it takes a small percentage of like the taxes of sports betting. So it's already like the money is already taken out, right? But now we're just trying to get a small piece of that sports betting revenue to put back into gambling recovery on a federal level. And it's just one of those things, right? So if there's, and I know that I'm comparing apples and oranges when it comes to tobacco and gambling, but I think more of my point was just like, this is something that caused harm and this is how they reacted to it. Yes, the harm is on a greater scale for this, but we could take even a scaled down version of that and put it towards gambling. It could make a huge difference. And, but even trying to push this GRIT Act through, it's still so much resistance, because if there's any kind of acknowledgement of accountability on the gambling or operator side, I think there's a lot of fear there that it's going to turn into like this tobacco industry big thing. And, it really boils down to the money. Where's the money going to go? What's going to happen to the money? And, just in my state alone last year, gambling was a $3.4 billion industry. And my state got $170 some million from tax revenue from that. And only 750,000 of it is set aside for gambling recovery. And I'm in a state where 10%, they just did a study where 10% of the adult population is struggling in some form with gambling. And, you think 750,000 is a lot of money for gambling recovery, but it's really not when it comes to the grand scheme of cost of recovery, the healthcare costs, even if they have to go into an inpatient treatment, that's that's $20,000 right there. Like all these different things. And it's just, it's pennies. And, there are some states that set up really good recovery setup. Like before they allowed gambling into their states, they already were promised this amount of the money to treat the harm. And I wish there was more of a federal format of that. You know what I mean? Like this amount of money needs to go to the care and treatment of people who are struggling from gambling. But it's all like, it gets really, really political here in the States. It really comes down to who's going to be responsible for this. And so for me, the RG campaigns are more about pushing the responsibility on the consumer. And I'm not saying I'm 100% accountable for my own actions, right? I'm 100% accountable for the choices I made, even though they didn't feel like choices, especially in the end. But that doesn't give a pass to the industry for making the yellow brick road to addiction so fucking easy. You know what I mean? Like just like with all the free plays, the comps, the VIP programs, all these things are like, it's like waving a flag, like, hey, come on, and in the space that I work in now, which I advocate for women who are suffering from this, like the stories that I hear of like them trying to even pause their accounts. And then they get emails that are like, well, we're doing this promotion right now. And they get talked back into not pausing their account. So there's just so much we need to do on the regulation front. And I'm probably the least political person you will ever meet in your life. Like I am not, but I can't stop being passionate for those people who are experiencing real harm, because at the end of the day, people are literally taking their lives because of this.
That's not political.
Disease.
That's just being a person,
addiction.
Isn't it? That's just being human.
Yeah. And I just see the stories and the way that sports betting is impacting the young men of our country right now. I just don't understand how people aren't more scared. I really don't.
It's honestly, it's the children. When you look at the casinofication of mobile games aimed at kids, loot boxes, and just basically the slot machine game mechanics being built into every kid's mobile game. That just becomes normal, like at such a young age. And sliding into a slot game or something becomes very comfortable and normal because it'll be effectively what they've just grown up with.
Very much so. Very much so. And what's interesting is I like to play video games occasionally, like just regular, like, I was playing one, just kind of I think it's Final Fantasy? Breath of the Wild. Whatever that one was. I was playing it, and there was an option where you can go into their casino and play their games for, it's not like like, it didn't represent to me like what I experienced, but it was still very similar, like, do this for this, and like kind of this thing. And it really floored me, like how normalized gambling is, and everything.
Go look at the casino in Grand Theft Auto. It's huge, absolutely huge. There's
casinos where you can play with Robux.
Yeah, we've seen. Yeah, we did an episode on so the kids platform Roblox, and the in-game currency. There's online casinos designed to take the in-game currency, so kids can literally gamble with their pocket money, virtual. And as a parent, you think, oh, it's Roblox, it's completely safe. Here's $5, go have some fun, buy your whatever you're building or whatever. So there's so much of that now. It's it's pretty scary.
There's a really good book. I was going to say, there's a really good book called Addiction by Design by Natasha Schull. Have you guys read that one?
I have. It's great.
It is fantastic. And she talks about like how they literally design out casinos to be like right down to the carpet, right? You're walking and they put a real busy pattern so that your eyes are focused up, right down to the smells that they put into the casino. Like it's, and then when you get more to the technical side of it and how they build it to be more engaging, the light source, all the different things, it's built to be addictive. There's no way around it.
I've seen some very clever developments on slot machines as well. There are slot machines. I did see these a few years ago. I think it was just pre-COVID, so I don't know if they caught on. But I saw some slots, very, very clever, designed to see where your eyes are pointing, and they have a character on the screen to make eye contact with you as you walk past. Which, if you think about magazine covers, almost every magazine cover you see, the person on the cover has their eyes out, because that sells more magazines than somebody whose eyes aren't out. It's responding to a very simple animal instinct. Oh, there's somebody looking at us. And it's, I saw this thing in action, and it's really damn clever. Really, I mean, imagine that on the end of a slot bank. You'd just be like, oh, I don't know why I'm drawn to this game. And the buxom lady on it. What would you say what's the major thing that you think you've learned from hosting the podcast and hearing other people's stories? What's your sort of big takeaway? Because I mean, you've been on a hell of a personal journey, but I know you've also heard an awful lot of people's other journeys. I know you've had their partners, their significant others on the podcast as well. So can you share a bit of wisdom, please?
I think for me, there's just so much work to be done in this community. And my biggest goals now, or passion now, is to really continue to work on that stigma of even struggling with gambling harm, especially in women, because here it's so stigmatized for women to get help, because a lot of times we're the primary caregivers of the family, the home, all these things. And it's so hard to prioritize our own self-care, our own mental health, and do all these things, get the help that we need to recover. And it's just like, it's so frustrating to me that women still don't feel safe getting the help that they need. And so for me to be out here sharing my story, and I'm usually pretty conservative on my views of the industry and all these things, because I want to be able to work in a space where we can all kind of find some middle ground. And I think that's my fallacy when I think about, oh, maybe we're all going to figure this out together. And that's probably not ever going to be the case, but I'm going to continue to work in this space, continue to share my story so that other women feel the hope, that they know that there is recovery, that there is things that they can do to change their life, to continue to move forward. But, even now the media is so interested in the sports betting epidemic, because it really, truly is a big problem. And I'm so grateful that people are even talking about it. But there's me over here on the side, like, hi, I'm a woman. I struggled with gambling too. And, because that's very much how I feel like I'm just kind of like wedging in there with all all the fellows like, hi, we're experiencing harm tremendously. And the harm that we experience, any of us who have struggled with addiction of any kind, it's not just our problem, right? It's a whole family problem. It's a whole community problem. As this really pours out into our communities, it impacts so much. And so I just want there to be more resources. Like anytime somebody comes in this space talking, like, the podcast community is absolutely amazing. We are all about, like, come on in. There's plenty of room for all of us. Like Jamie, Brian Hatch, like they're all my podcasting family. They're amazing. We all connect. We do lots of things. I think Hatch and Jamie and myself, we just did an AMA on Reddit. And so we team up and we do all these things to continue to spread awareness, to continue to talk about gambling harm. And, some of them get a little more heated about the industry, and there needs to be more of that. I think there needs to be more. Right now, everybody walks this line because that's where the funding is coming from right now. That's why I keep talking about the federal funding, because there is no funding. So most of the funding is coming from the industry in some way or another. And so everybody walks this really tight line of like, oh, we can't make them mad because, maybe we won't get as much funding, and we need funding for this project, and we need funding for this project. Do you see how wrong that is? That you have to work with the people who are causing the harm to get the funding, to get the help that you need. And so then you're like, everybody's just trying to walk this line of like, don't piss them off because we need funding for this project to help these people. And that just seems so wrong to me. And that's the one thing that no matter how not political I am, I can see that. And I can't see how there isn't more people that see that's wrong. We shouldn't have to beg for funding to help people who are experiencing harm. Nobody at this point in life should have to figure out access to help. Nobody. And so that's why I keep doing this work. That's why, because the podcast I do is absolutely free resource for recovery. The work that I do doesn't cost anybody. And that's what I can do for my part.
I was doing some work with an operator from the Southern Hemisphere, and they asked me to suggest some resources that they could direct players to if they had any that were showing signs. I gave them yours and Jamie's podcasts, amongst a few other things, because I do think the ability to hear other voices that have been in the same place, I think it's absolutely priceless. But regarding the funding thing, it's a really tricky one. Here in the UK, you have people who say, 1 week you'll see them on Twitter saying, oh my God, how on earth can the industry be funding this thing? I mean, they caused all the problems. And the following week they're saying, Jesus, the gambling industry really should be paying for this. And you think, you really need to make your fucking mind up. See, I do believe that the industry should be a part of that conversation, as long as it's done in the right way and we all act like grown-ups and we bring our big boy pants. Because the other thing, and this is really important, is that the industry has the data for the research. And that is a big fucking deal. And I know the ROGA, as they call themselves, Roga, I'm kind of liking calling them Roger. They were set up recently, and I don't know whether I'm being naive in having high hopes for them, but the lady at the top, Dr. Shatley, she's got pretty decent background, and she's very research oriented and evidence oriented, and they've already taken like $20+ million in funding to get off the ground. So you got to think, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's a start. And if they're going to be funding research and doing things with it, then brilliant. So yeah, I get what you're saying, but my feeling is the industry has to be involved in it. But maybe done, some countries have almost like a clearinghouse system. So the industry puts a percentage of turnover in, and then that's distributed from one central charity body to other charities, for example. So nobody's begging. It's just, you have to put in this percentage, put it in, shut up and fuck off. And researchers are working with those operators, individually as or as part of universities or whatever, and it's kind of working. But I think one of the other keys is regulation has to move faster, because the pace of regulation and the way that state level bodies work, the snail pace that they work at is just fucking stupid. I know they're busy and they've got a lot to cover. Well, that's what'll happen if you only convene for 6 weeks a fucking year.
Right.
No wonder you're busy. Just imagine if you did 12. But what do I know? I don't even have hair. But anyway, sorry. We need to kill it there. Unfortunately, Christina, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your company and your experience very, very much. And good luck with the podcast. We hope it continues to grow and continues to help people who aren't feeling heard, basically.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.